Hi, everybody. Welcome to our third webinar in the Back to Business webinar series. We have a really special session today on mentorship, and we have Suzanne Cupps and Anita Lowe, two chefs who have spoken publicly about their mentorship relationship with each other, and we're really looking forward to diving into that today. Before we do that, I wanted to quickly introduce Shauna Bircher, who's here from Audi. Audi has made this entire series possible. They're the presenting and founding sponsor of our women's leadership programs and have just been an amazing partner for us these last couple of years. And so with that, I will let her say a few words.
Thank you so much, Emily. We're so honored to be a part of this program and so happy that all of you took the time to be here today. I'm personally honored to be on such an esteemed panel with Anita and Suzanne, and looking forward to listening into their conversation today too and gleaning some insights. I think it's great that you've all taken this opportunity. Mentorship is critical to Audi, and we've been obviously a founding partner of the Women's Leadership Programs here with the James Beard Foundation. And I think from my perspective, and you'll definitely get some great perspectives here today, but from mine and the way that Audi approaches it, I think mentorship doesn't always have to be just one thing and be just kind of this one-on-one relationship. I think you can also be leading by example that is probably mentoring more people than you may even realize. I think people can choose a mentor that is someone that they want to emulate and then make that those insights their own. I think we can all mentor by just providing opportunities and also just by doing the right thing. And we've tried to show up that way in a lot of different ways with the James Beard Foundation. Right now, we're also in the middle of the Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Program, which is going to go on for another few weeks, which is really inspiring to see these women grow their businesses in this industry. That's been so great. At the start of COVID, we also started working with the Lee Initiative, also providing some great mentorship opportunities for women. But also there, we just showed up with a fleet of vehicles when they had a need and this industry had a need. And it's just showing up to do the right thing, actually, at the times that people need it by far the most. And then in our own category, we work in a lot of STEM programs. We work with the Forbes Idea Incubator, and we also work with a program with NYU, just developing students in the areas of STEM, and for us, obviously, critical in the automotive and engineering space. But I'm really personally interested to learn a lot more today from these two women and hear what we have to talk about through the rest of this Back to Business section. So thank you for having me, Emily. We're really excited for all of this and to see what comes out of this industry, and we're really cheering for everyone contributing as much as we can as we get through COVID in this really challenging time. Thank you. Back to you, Emily.
Thank you. That was great. Fleet being there when you really need it. They've definitely pulled through for us many times before. So before we get into the panel today, I wanted to just share a little bit about how this webinar is going to work. So this is being recorded. By next week, the recording will be available on our events page and our industry support page that is at our new website, openforgood.com. Openforgood.com, just so you guys know really quickly, is an industry-facing website for that has resources. It does also have a mentorship portal where you can find a mentor, and that's presented by our partners at KitchenAid. We will have questions that we can answer towards the end as time allows, but understand that you might have a clarifying question, so just send those through as you have them, and we will get to them if we can. If you are having technical difficulties, send us a message also using the questions function, and we'll try to troubleshoot that for you. If it's an audio or video issue or you can't see something, we would recommend first trying another browser or something like that before logging off altogether, but we hope we'll make it work for you. All right, so without further ado, I am so excited to introduce Suzanne and Anita. I think we'll just start really quickly by having you both introduce yourselves. So I'll go in the order of who I see, but Anita, do you want to go first?
Okay. Hi, my name is Anita Lowe. I was a chef and owner of a Nisa restaurant in the West Village here. for 17 years, and Suzanne came to work for me for 5 of those years. Yeah. Do I need to say more? I wrote 2 cookbooks, Cooking Without Borders, and most recently Solo, a modern cookbook for a party of one. And pre-pandemic and hopefully post-pandemic, I lead culinary tours around the planet with the Tour de Forks, Forks.
I'm Suzanne Cupps. I am the chef of a new restaurant called 232 Bleecker, also in the West Village, just a couple blocks from where Anita was. We're a American restaurant. We focus on local food, try to put vegetables at the center of the plate. And yeah, we've been open since last December, so definitely not a year of being open because of the pandemic, but we are back and cooking again, which is a really exciting place to be in. And I know very, very thankful because a lot of our friends and neighbors aren't in that place right now. So I started my first culinary job was at Anita. So Anita got me fresh from 6 months in culinary school, which is not a very long time, and went on to work at Gramercy Tavern after, and then was the chef of Untitled Restaurant, and now at 232 Bleecker.
Thank you so much. And you got into it a little bit, and we were joking before we came on here that I was writing down these questions for you guys, and it sounded like dating. But that said, it is a very intimate relationship between a mentor and a mentee, but I would love to just start by hearing about how you guys met, obviously working together at Anita, but if you could share a little bit more about how that relationship evolved and how, maybe we'll start with you, Suzanne, how you felt like Anita maybe took you under her wing.
Sure. So I moved to New York after graduating college in 2002 and had no inkling of joining the culinary world. And a couple of years after I lived here, just kind of got more and more into food and cooking a little bit, but just the idea of a career in hospitality. So not only did I not know anything about cooking when I went to culinary school, I went to ICE, Institute of Culinary Education, when I was on 23rd Street, and I didn't know a thing about braising, searing, chopping, like nothing. So it was a very quick whirlwind, of cooking before I got to Anita. And then I really didn't know anything about any good restaurants in New York. So when it was time to do an externship to finish up my schooling there, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. So I ended up just kind of by chance at Gramercy Tavern and did a few months externship there and learned a little bit about what the restaurant industry was, but really, just had my head down and peeling and chopping things. So when I went, when I graduated and I had to take a first job, I again just really, I didn't know any chefs' names. I didn't know any great restaurants, and a girl in my class said, "Oh, I saw that there's an opening at Anita. I'm gonna go check it out." And I was like, "Sure, I'm gonna go check it out." And so I really don't even know. I don't know if I went before her or if she actually went. I'm not really sure what happened, but Anita had a spot open for a garde manger cook, which is like, the entry level into the kitchen. And I showed up one day and they told me to cut this and, mix this, and I did. And I guess, I did okay. But, to be honest, I didn't know who Anita was. I didn't know Anita, but I did know when I walked into that kitchen, it was a very small kitchen, very intimate, 3 cooks on the line and Anita. And I did know that I felt comfortable and like stepping into a kitchen for the first time, that was probably the highest thing on my list. I also knew that the tasks that they gave me that day were things that I wanted to learn and I wanted to do. And so that kind of was my first introduction to Anita Kitchen.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything about that experience from your perspective? Meeting Suzanne and
Yeah, he was amazing. I mean, you keep on saying that you didn't have much experience, and sure you didn't, but what you had was innate talent and drive, and he had dexterity, and you could tell she was smart too. So yeah, I always tell this story that when she came through our kitchen, she really just put her head down and was working, and she could follow along really easily. And I have never ever hired anyone on the spot. I always check like 2 references at least, um, and I try to see as many applicants as possible to find the best one. And that day I knew that she was special, and so at the end of the trail, I offered her a job. I was like, just gonna go out on a limb here, and you see, I wasn't wrong.
I still remember what I was doing that day. I still remember like the task. I had to cut white tuna. I had to dice Asian pear. I remember cutting shiso, like all these things I remember on my first trail in the restaurant. Things I did many more times after that, but it was a very memorable day. And I think like, especially when you're a new cook setting foot, or any cook like transitioning into a kitchen, it can be very nerve wracking and very, it's a high intensity environment, and there's a lot on the line, and you don't want to cut something wrong or, make the wrong move. And I just remember feeling not at ease because it was easy, because I don't think there was any days that were easy in that kitchen, but it was definitely a welcoming environment and a learning kitchen, which is what I needed.
Yeah, I love that idea of the environment sort of making it possible for you to feel comfortable. We talked a little bit last week on our webinar about psychological safety and how to create those spaces for your employees, but basically really just making an environment where people feel comfortable to make mistakes and ask questions. And that's one of those things too that's important for a mentorship relationship to evolve, or if you're in this tiny kitchen together and everybody's screaming at each other and things are really tense. Obviously things are going to be tense sometimes, but creating an environment of safety can really help facilitate these close relationships. I love the idea of that. I think what we had talked about a little bit also before we came on here is, why it's so important to have a mentor. And I think there are two kind of offshoots of that question, where it's one, why is it important for women in this industry to have a mentor? And also during COVID, why is it important to have a mentor? All sort of navigating this unusual and crazy time. But I guess I'll start with Anita. Why do you feel like it's important for people to have mentors or mentees?
That I always wished I had growing up in the industry, and not that I didn't have a mentor, but I really counted the Waltucks as my mentors, and David Waltuck as my mentor. I mean, on some level, Boulay was a mentor, but they were all, Waltuck was definitely not comfortable with that role, and Boulay was just way too busy. So, and I do think representation helps. If you can see someone that is like you, that's female, or person of color, or gay, or whatever identity you have, that is in a role of who's made it, someone who has risen above, it shows you that you can do that as well. And I think that's just so important, and that's why I think we need to elevate chefs of color, Black chefs, trans chefs, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just writing everything down. I'm always learning so much on these. Suzanne, what about you? Why do you feel like it's important to have a mentor?
Well, I'll tie in kind of something that Anita mentioned too. A mentor, and I don't think your mentor has to necessarily look like you or be like you. I think you can learn a lot from someone that grew up differently or cooks differently, or but I do, part of my intro to the cooking world is again, it wasn't that I was coming in so blindly in terms of that I didn't have an opinion or I didn't, wasn't observant. It was just I didn't really know the industry. And so when I went to work for Anita, I had no idea that there weren't more women chefs. I just, I didn't know that. And so when I guess like, it's interesting because, in the past 5 years or so, since we've been talking about more, how to encourage women to stay in the industry and become chefs, it was something that kind of took me by surprise, and I always took for granted because I just didn't even know that was, wasn't a thing that was normal in the kitchen. So I think I was just very fortunate to have, my first chef and my mentor to be Anita and to be a woman, and that was somewhat, what kept me there for so long too. So it's not that it, it's not that I didn't choose to have a woman. It's just I kind of wandered into Anita's kitchen and then was hooked by the way she taught and the way she ran her kitchen and the food she cooked. And I think that's it. Is, a mentor can be a lot of things. It could be someone who just gives you good advice, who gives you practical things that you can learn. But I think what I feel is so important as a mentor is, especially in the kitchen, is to find someone that has both sides, someone who you respect how they cook, and you respect how they run the kitchen. So for me, I think that's what I'm looking to be for other cooks. Is I want to be, I may not be the exact person they want to turn into, and that's okay. But I think that it's important, not just the way we speak, but the way we cook. So a little bit of both. And even if someone who wants to eventually cook Italian food comes into my kitchen, I don't cook Italian food. We make some pastas, but that's not the chef I am. But I think they can learn something from me that takes them to the next level. And so I think, again, as a mentor, you're trying to grow all different parts of someone, and not just their cooking ability, and not necessarily just their intellectual ability or their personality or whatever it is. I think it's good to be a well-rounded mentor.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, you said that about pasta, but there was a short rib pasta, I think, on the menu at Untitled that I had when you were there. That was like the best thing that I've ever had. So I don't know.
I
cook
it, but I won't let other Italian chefs eat my pasta. So there's that.
Oh yeah, well, I'm far from it. I'm easy to impress.
I think you can.
Yeah, but I think this is something that we talk about all the time as a part of our women's leadership programs, which is there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to mentorship. It's not an exact science in terms of matching people, bringing people together. I think there are a couple of components. One is, these relationships really do need to develop sort of naturally. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't go out of your way and ask somebody to be your mentor, but it does mean that both people need to be invested in the success of each other. Both people need to have a deep respect for one another, a desire to see each other succeed. And I think from a mentor perspective too, I need to jump in at any time if you feel like this resonates. I think from a mentor perspective, it's about feeling like you have something to learn from the mentee. It's not always going to be so one-sided where one person is just providing advice and tips. Like, I think that there's a lot that both parties can learn from each other, and that's what makes it so important. Is like this back and forth, free flowing of ideas.
Sure, yeah. I mean, yeah, Suzanne was my go-to presentation employee. So yeah, every time I did a dish, it was sort of like, I can do the presentation, and sometimes I would do well, but a lot of times I would just give it to Suzanne. It's like, just figure out something, make this prettier. And yeah, but also, all of your employees have a lot to say, and I think that's really important. And they need to feel heard. I think it needs to be a back and forth. That's how you create a safe environment. They all come from different areas of the world and with different backgrounds, and that, from a culinary perspective, there's a lot to learn there. There's a ton to learn there for me.
Yeah.
Also, I think in terms of like mentoring, because most of us, if you're in a kitchen, even a smaller kitchen like Anissa, I mean, the one I run isn't that much bigger in terms of number of cooks, but I think it's interesting when you're thinking about mentoring, to try to figure out how to mentor your whole team. And I think that's really important because everybody will have different personality, different ways of learning, especially if you're talking about men and women. You know, a lot of men learn in a different way than women learn, and so to be able to not treat people differently, but to kind of appeal towards what others beneath you, how they need to learn. I think it's really interesting, and something else that drew me to Anissa was not just that Anita could be a mentor to me, but that she was a mentor to everybody in the kitchen. And so all four of us that worked underneath her at any given time were very close to Anita. And so I think that's interesting because what it does is it creates a stronger team, all because we understand what Anita's expectations were, but also that we were all kind of striving for the same thing. And not only that I didn't have to only learn from Anita, I could learn from Sawa or Titus, who were my two sous chefs that worked for Anita for years and years. And so it was kind of nice that the person on the station above me and the person on the station below me were very strong cooks too at every time I was at Anissa. And the turnover was also very small, which is another plus of mentorship. Of course, like the goal is to grow the people underneath you to take your position or to move into another restaurant and move up. But I really feel like mentorship, if you do it right, you should be mentoring everyone in the kitchen in slightly different ways, and it becomes a better team environment.
Yeah, I love that as mentorship as like a lever to reduce turnover. It's such a good advice for leadership, and makes total sense. A lot of the time with this industry, since there's such a focus on technical skills, maybe sometimes, and I can't speak for every kitchen, I can't even speak for any kitchen, I'm just saying in my apartment, but with this emphasis on technical skills, it gets hard to think about these other soft skills, so leadership, mentorship, and so much of that goes into running a kitchen and running your own business in general. But trying to put that that like business imperative on there by saying like, no, if you mentor your employees, you can actually reduce turnover, and then you actually can save money because you're not having to train and retrain people. It's like such a technical dollars and cents thing that makes perfect sense. So that was such a great point.
And I don't know exactly the definition difference between leadership and mentorship, but I would say mentorship is definitely involved more in the whole person that's working for you, or if that's the mentorship relationship. And so I think that you can be a leader in the kitchen as a chef or as an owner or as a front of house manager or whatever, wherever you are, you can be a leader. But again, what you're talking about with the turnover, if you actually take the next step into mentorship, you're investing more. You're saying that it's not a one way. It's not like I'm leading you and you're following. You're saying that your whole well-being is important to me, and that means back and forth conversations. And I think that kind of goes to the point of it's not just the mentor that helps the mentee. It's a relationship. So vice versa, as a mentor, you learn things from people underneath you too. And I think that can create, again, less turnover because people, there is that back and forth, and it's not just a directional one way.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a quick segue, Anita, you touched on this a little bit about things that you saw in Suzanne that were really special, that you hired her on the spot, which you never do because she had all these qualities. But as your sort of relationship evolved, what were some things that made her a good mentee, or what qualities should people be looking out for when they're looking to take on a mentee?
Well, you know, she was one of the nicest employees I've ever had. Yeah, and she was always so generous and forgiving, and I mean, I think the thing about a kitchen and a hierarchy, like hierarchical, I'm sorry, I'm having one of those days, um, system like a kitchen is that, even within that hierarchy, we're just all human and we all make mistakes. And so there has to be room for those mistakes. And yeah, and that's why that forgiving generosity that Suzanne has was so important to me. Because if I made a mistake, then she would forgive me, and let me let me continue. Um, but aside from that, it's just everything. It's like, does this person, you do want someone that sort of fits within the ethos of your team, of your restaurant. You create a culture, and you want, yeah, you want, and at least we wanted nice, open-minded people that were really interested in other cultures and food. It was important to me that I had someone that loved food, loved eating, loved the whole process. I mean, it's everything. That's the thing about restaurants. It really is just everything.
I get that. Suzanne, what about you? What were some qualities? I mean, you talked about leadership and sort of Anita creating this safe space for you, but were there any other qualities that stood out to you that made her a great mentor?
Sure. First off, I don't remember her ever making mistakes. So I'm not sure how much forgiveness I had to have, but yes, one of the big ones, and it may not have been like the first thing that I noticed, but definitely as I grew up in that restaurant, Anita's passion for travel and different flavors was just was really important. She traveled a lot. She liked to cook the food. It wasn't that because we served a Korean dish, we weren't a Korean restaurant. But she was very authentic in the way that she prepared food from other cultures, and I thought still, like, that's a big influence in the type of food that I cook now. I think that was important to see and to learn. Some of it was the flavor, some of it was the technique or the style of food. And that was really cool. And I still aspire to travel more myself and kind of taste things for myself. That was part of it. And then just the passion behind eating. Anita would read the Times and talk about restaurants, and especially in the colder months, she would spend time eating at New York restaurants and talk about it. And as a young cook, like, one thing you don't have is money. So you might have the desire to eat places, but it's hard. So we would make family meals with different flavors, and we each had our own day. And she allowed us to kind of, within reason, make whatever we wanted. So I think that was like a really good thing, because as a cook, you're given recipes and you're told this is what's on the menu, this is the dish. And so to be able to have some freedom during family meal and cook the whole meal yourself, sometimes they were terrible, and and sometimes they were like ways to express ourselves as cooks. So I thought that was really great. But really just like having a passion and an excitement for food and restaurants was really important, because that's not what drew me into cooking. What drew me into cooking was really that the technique and like the precision. I like to small dice and julienne and all the perfect knife cuts. That's what I really like from the start. And training my palate was something I didn't have. And so as a mentor, I felt that's probably what I learned the most from Anita is to how to taste and how to have a good palate.
Totally. It's like when you're in an industry, sometimes it's the last thing that you want to look at or talk about or do in your free time. And it can be so easy to not be passionate about what you do, because the thing that drew you into it in the first place can often just be something that like you can't look at anymore. So I always think it like this idea of instilling a sense of passion and curiosity about your own industry seems like it might be obvious, but it's really not. Like, not all food people love food. Some people, I mean, they all love food in a certain sense, but not all food people are super passionate about it in the way that you're describing, which is, I think, a big misconception and so interesting. So thank you for sharing that. It's great. This wasn't on my list of questions, but it did, something that we talked about did make me think about it, which is, have either of you had a mentor or a mentee that you haven't worked with, or somebody that was in a different industry that you've relied on for help? And can you talk a little bit about that, if so? If not, it's fine, because I know I didn't tell you.
I had a mentee through the Dame Stuffy at one point, who actually did eventually come do a little stage with me. But yeah, and I do think there was another woman that had reached out to me and wanted me to mentor her. And I think I met with her maybe 3 or 4 times. Yeah, but I do think it's better when when you're actually working with someone, you get to know them better. It's sorry, there's something wrong with my throat. It's just a little bit more contact. It seems to make more sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. I've kind of struggled. I've tried to have mentors in other restaurants before, and partially just because this industry is so busy and there's not regular hours. I've found it very hard to kind of find the right times to meet with them. And then I think the other thing is it's a really a sensitive issue. Mentoring someone in another restaurant or business. And, I've had them come to trail in my restaurant and see what we do. And it's hard not to do it as like a pitch to come work for me, or, we're always so nervous about stealing other people, or, being mindful of where someone is in their career. And it just is, I've always found it kind of awkward, because if they're having issues in their kitchen, or, wanting to know, the styles in every kitchen are a little different. So it would be hard for me to say, like, well, here we do it this way, and kind of speak badly on the way things were happening there. So I've tried a couple of times, and it hasn't, for me at least in cooking, hasn't worked out.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think someone who has worked for you, and maybe you weren't necessarily mentored to them while they were with you, for whatever reason it was, if they went to work elsewhere, I have found better even if it's not as close of a mentorship relationship, I have found it's easier to give advice and kind of someone that you already know how they work.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And we talk about you looking for mentors in other industries that can maybe fill in the gaps, because there's so much that you can miss when you're in your own kind of silo. It's of course important to have people in your industry, because especially in the restaurant industry, like, those are the only people who are going to really understand what you're going through. Otherwise, people just don't really get it the day to day. But in terms of like entrepreneurship or taking on a new leadership role, like, those are things that you can learn, I think, from a person in another industry, maybe. But I see what you're saying, how it can get a little bit weird if it's like not a competitor, but if you're trying to get them to come over. So yeah. Okay, surprise question. That's the last of the surprises for me. Before we go into questions from the audience, because we have about 4 or 5 minutes before I want to open it up to the floor. If there was one piece of advice that you could give to anybody right now, either a mentor or a mentee, kind of navigating through this time, what piece of advice would you give them on how to find or maintain a mentorship relationship?
Don't be afraid to reach out, Suzanne. If you need me, I'm here.
Thanks. I do.
Yeah, I'm bad at
tonight.
keeping up with people, just in general. But yeah, I do think you should not be afraid to reach out. I think right now, a lot of us are feeling so isolated in general. just force yourself to keep that relationship alive, especially if you're not working together right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe again, like, you know, I'm in a really fortunate position where I am working, and with about a third of my team that was here. So I'm able to work even more closely with those that are here with me. And so I think that's a really good opportunity to have more one-on-one, hands-on time, where we're kind of all thrown in together, because it's not really that I'm the chef and that I, you know, expedite or I do these things. It's like, no, I set up the station, I wash dishes, you know, I do everything. I'm on the same level as everybody else here. And so, which has really made me even more, even though I already did appreciate every position in the restaurant, I very much do now. But I think for those who are not able to actively work right now in restaurants, it's hard because it's, you know, you're used to being on your feet. The days go really quickly. It's grueling work. It's hard, but it's also work that energizes you, and it's creative. And so I would say, you know, for anybody that has a mentor, like maybe right now it's I mean, everybody's reflecting, everybody's thinking COVID thoughts of, you know, what should I be doing and all those, but maybe reflecting on some lessons that your mentor has given you, and maybe using it as a time to work on those things if you want to stay in the industry, and trying to better yourself. Because the good thing about cooking is it doesn't have to be done in a restaurant, even though it's the life a lot of us know. It can easily be done at home. So I think trying to keep at least your mind active, and your, you know, keeping relevant, whether it's cookbooks or whether it's, you know, practicing different techniques at home. I think that could be good. And then when you do return to work, you're able to jump in a little bit faster, and kind of continue that relationship. But again, like there's, I think for mentor relationship, it's good to check in on your own person, but it is hard because you don't have necessarily that technical aspect right now for everybody.
I'll be in soon. I'll come visit you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense, Anita. I love what you said about not being afraid to reach out, because I feel like that intimidation is a big factor that stops people from even reaching out to potential mentors in the first place. And so it's important to remember that there are people who are ready and willing to help you, and are there for you if you need anything. And so I'll open it up for questions now. And while those are coming in, I would just offer a quick plug for our mentorship platform, which is, you know, not the reason why we came up with this topic before, but we did launch a mentorship portal, which I touched on a little bit earlier. That's presented by KitchenAid. You can find it at openforgood.com/mentorship. And there's a whole list of mentors there that are, you know, they have volunteered already to help and to be reached out to. And so you can filter by skill if you need help on just like one specific thing, one specific topic, or you can sort by geographic location. So it makes it really easy to find what you're looking for, and then just hit that request button because people are ready and willing to help you. So that's my plug. That's the last I'll say. We did have a question come in that was asking about staging if you're at a larger company, and I don't know if either of you, since I think they were both relatively small operations, but if you're at a larger company, how would you handle staging when, you know, according to the Department of Labor or at HR, those people who are coming in to learn from you need to be paid for the time that they worked? How do you handle that?
So I worked for Union Square Hospitality Group, which is a very big company, you know, in terms of the number of restaurants. And we always paid for trails. And I think that's one thing that's changed over the years too. And we pay for stages or trails here at 232 Bleecker too. I think the industry has just shifted, and that's just something we do. So I think with that, you know, businesses have to be mindful of their costs. So a lot of times we'll do maybe an interview or a pre-screening over the phone just to make sure that it feels like it's could be the right fit for both of us. But that's just, I think, a normal practice for restaurants now to pay for, you know, whether someone's there for 6 hours or so.
Yeah, I come from dinosaur years, so that's all Suzanne.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think it's important to pay and compensate people for their time anyway, even if it's just a small amount of time. If we're trying to professionalize the industry, which is like a loaded term, but if we're trying to make people feel more comfortable in kitchens and make them more likely to stay and help people to succeed, it's important to make them feel important and that their time is valuable and stop folks from getting taken advantage of, stuff like that.
Also, there's always so much work to do. So someone being in the kitchen for 6 hours is super helpful to do, to help out with the work. But I also think that on the topic of staging, it's like, I think it's the best way, especially in a kitchen environment. And, speaking, of course, like Anita, like just being there in person, seeing what the personalities are, who the people are is so, and how people are treated, what's the atmosphere of the kitchen, is it, and also like to taste the food and to see the techniques. And so I think staging is super important in this career.
Yeah. There was a follow-up question about that, which is if you do full paperwork for folks who are just for a.
I think every restaurant and every company is a little bit different. They handle it different, but yes, like we do paperwork so we can process the checks, and it's not cash given out, so everybody gets a check.
Yeah.
But I think every restaurant and every group does it a little differently.
Right. Yeah. So I hope that answered those questions. We did have another one come in. I'll pose this to both of you because I think that you both have a lot to offer on this topic. But the person asking the question wanted to know, how do you approach chefs in restaurants when just starting in the industry, since most restaurants will ask for people with experience. They don't want to take the time to train a young cook. So how do you make them see that, you have potential even when you don't have a lot of experience to put on your resume? And I think we can come at this from both sides, as both like the chef who's young without experience, but also as the employer, like what sort of things you would want to see in somebody who's new. So I don't know if either of you want to start.
Yeah, how do you do that these days? I mean, normally back in the day, you just have them come do a trail, which you could still do, but I don't know, with the whole monetary issue right now, that's difficult. So I would just say you need to convey your enthusiasm and your passion. You need to try to show that you have been responsible on your resume. And it would be good to show that you have some sort of dexterity somehow, if that's possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's like I had that same resume where I didn't have any experience at all. And, I did go to cooking school, so that was kind of my foot in the door. So I'm sure it's hard for folks who, haven't either worked their way up in restaurants or gone to cooking school. And, it's an expensive undertaking. So that's not for everyone. But I would say my best advice would be go eat at the restaurant. It's really hard. I mean, you can show up with a resume in hand, but depending on, especially now with COVID, that might not be the best way. But if you can go eat, it doesn't mean that you have to have a tasting menu or expensive meal. You could just have a snack or a drink or something like that. But go see what the environment's like, ask questions, introduce yourself. You might get to meet the chef or the general manager. And I feel like if, again, it's that like face-to-face, if people see you, it's not a resume, that kind of gets passed over. It might take a little bit more, have a little more weight, because maybe they'll hear a story about you or why you want to be in this restaurant. It could help if you're in the area of where you're applying.
Yeah, I feel like I've done 100 of these webinars and no one has ever given that advice. And
I've hired diners before. I've hired people that have come in had a meal with their family or by themselves, and had conversations with them. At least I can think of at least two of them at Untitled that I've hired. It shows interest. It shows interest in the food, and also again, like it has that conversation, and maybe we can find a little bit more out about the person than you would see on a resume.
Yeah, love that. Anita, I think you were saying something and then I interrupted you, or maybe you weren't.
No,
Oh, good for me.
no, I was saying that it was great advice. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't know why
Yeah.
I've never heard it. It seems so simple and so smart. I guess in some cases it's cost prohibitive, but you were saying, you don't have to go do a whole thing. You can just go get something small.
Yeah.
And then once you introduce yourself, the person will know why you're there, obviously. If you're just like, yeah, I just wanted to check it out. That's great. I wrote that down. Awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions that are here. I don't know if I'll give everybody like another second or two to send something in. But I would just remind everyone while we do that, we have our last webinar of this series. Well, we have all of our webinars every week, but the last Back to Business webinar is going to be taking place next week. And that is going to be on creating an agile business model with Cohn Resnick, who are a big financial planning, accounting. They do a lot of stuff, but they're going to be talking to us about how we can sort of look at our business models and make sure that they're a little bit more resilient, so that if something like this happens again, which hopefully it won't, but if something similar happens again where the restaurants are not in a position to stay open, how can we diversify our revenue streams, and what sort of concrete changes can we make to our business plans to make sure that we're prepared. I hope that we're not in this situation again, but obviously we want to all make sure about that. So I don't see anything else, so I guess we can wrap up a little bit early. I would just say thank you so much to our partners at Audi. They have been amazing champions of our women's leadership programs work, particularly our women's entrepreneurial leadership program, but truly this series and so many others. They are amazing collaborators. So thank you so much to them. Thank you so much to Anita and Suzanne. I have been wanting to do a webinar with a mentor-mentee pair for so long, so I think it would be like so fun. And I was right. This was really sweet. It was nice to sort of get a window into your relationship and see a mentorship relationship in action. So thank you both so much for joining, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I guess I'll close with that unless Suzanne or Anita have anything else they want to say.
Thanks. Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. We'll see you next week. Bye.